Welcome back, everyone, to another explainer brought to you by Forge College. Today, we are staging a heist. Well, kinda. We're putting on our black beanies and actively testing the defenses of the very systems we've been building. Now, if you've been following along in our track from EVM to SVM, transitioning from Ethereum to Solana, you know we've been deep in the weeds of account abstraction. Today is all about the security patterns and edge cases of those systems. We're going to identify, reproduce, and mitigate the most common vulnerabilities you'll find in session key and account abstraction flows on Solana. Let's get right into it.
So there's this saying in Web3 development, assume everyone wants your test lamports. It sounds a little funny, right? But it honestly sets the exact perfect tone for what we're doing today. We really need to treat our local test validator like it's a high-stakes casino vault. Because look, when we issue delegated session keys, it's basically like handing out VIP valet keys. And out there in the dark forest of the blockchain, there are always digital pickpockets just waiting to snatch them up. If we don't lock down our test environment as if there are millions of dollars on the line, our production environments absolutely won't stand a chance. In our previous lesson, we designed what we call the happy path for user operations with session keys. That was all about just making the thing work, right? Generating an ephemeral key, slapping on some delegation constraints, verifying it. It was a beautiful flow, but honestly, it's pretty fragile. Today, we are walking the hardened path. Because before we even think about taking our code to the capstone project or anywhere remotely near production, we have to subject it to some serious security testing. We have to anticipate those weird edge cases, malicious inputs, and totally unexpected behaviors. Here is the quick game plan for today's guided debugging lab. We're going to map out the session key attack surface, tackle stopping replay attacks with nonces, block instruction forgery with strict whitelists, build a session key kill switch, and finally compile all of this into your security lab debug report. All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the session key attack surface. So a session key essentially provides a short-lived cryptographic authority. It's exactly like handing a VIP valet key to a driver at an exclusive club. It lets them park your car without handing over the literal pink slip to your vehicle. But here's the catch. By accepting signed delegations, you're inherently expanding your attack surface. We are specifically hunting for weak points exposed when your system accepts these delegations. We're talking weak or missing replay protection, instruction scopes that are just way too broad, or a revocation system that's brittle or maybe just non-existent. Our goal today is to test for these precise failure modes in a controlled local environment so that your delegation code ends up completely bulletproof. Moving right along to section 2, stopping replay attacks with nonces. A replay attack is, well, exactly what it sounds like. It's when someone captures a previously valid signed operation and just blindly resubmits it to a relay to execute that exact same action again, entirely unexpectedly. Imagine our digital pickpocket finds yesterday's VIP wristband in the trash, walks right up to the club, and gets in. Why? Because the bouncer is only checking if the wristband is real, but isn't bothering to check the date. That, right there, is a replay attack. So how do we actually test for this? Well, we get to play the villain for a minute. Here's how you reproduce this heist in your local solana-test-validator. Step 1. Run your baseline successful flow and capture the signed operation produced by that session key. Step 2. Take that perfectly identical signed operation and just resubmit it to the relay a few minutes later. Change absolutely nothing. Step 3. Pull up your validator logs. If your relay is missing its protections, you are going to see that transaction execute a second time, perfectly successfully. Boom, you've just proved a massive vulnerability exists in your code. Okay, let's take off the black beanie and put the white hat back on. Here is our mitigation strategy. To stop a replay attack cold, we have to implement a nonce mechanism. First up, we add a unique nonce field directly into the delegation payload itself. Second, and this is the absolutely critical part, we require the relay verifier to actively persist and remember every single consumed nonce tied to that specific session pub key. Finally, if the relay ever sees an operation trying to use a nonce that's already been flagged as used, it instantly rejects it before it ever even reaches the RPC. The bouncer is finally checking the date, and the replay fails. Which brings us to section 3, blocking forgery with whitelists. Now, this is a vulnerability where attackers get a bit more creative. Instruction forgery is when someone crafts a malicious transaction that sneaks a highly privileged instruction, like, say, draining your wallet with a token transfer, right past a lazy relay that isn't checking the specific opcodes. Think of it this way. You hand the valet your keys and say, "Park my car." But you didn't explicitly forbid them from taking it on the highway, so the valet takes your car to a street drag race instead of the parking garage.
Because your instructions weren't explicit enough, the system allowed something catastrophic to happen.
To pull this off as the attacker, you'd follow these steps. Step 1, create a delegation that claims to only allow a very specific, limited action. Step 2, grab your attacker key, craft a transaction using that same session key, but swap out the intended, safe instruction with a highly privileged one, like a token transfer straight to your own attacker account. Step 3, submit it. If your relay is being lazy and doesn't actively parse the concrete instruction layout to verify it against the actual delegation constraints, it's just going to execute that malicious transaction. You've successfully forged an instruction.
The fix here is simple but strict. Instruction-level whitelisting. Your mitigation requires that the delegation explicitly encodes the exact permitted instruction opcodes, the program IDs, and the account indices. No exceptions. Then, at verification time, your relay has to actively parse the candidate transaction and cross-reference every single instruction against that declared whitelist. If there is even one tiny discrepancy, if an opcode is slightly off, the relay throws it out entirely. We are enforcing the absolute principle of least privilege here.
Next up, Section 4, the session key kill switch.
Okay, so even if we perfectly prevent replays and block all forgeries, what happens if the ephemeral key pair itself just gets stolen? Sure, ephemeral keys are designed to be short-lived, but while they're active, they hold very real power. If an attacker manages to compromise a user's device and extracts that active session key, all your fancy payload protections aren't going to do a thing, because the attacker now has the completely valid signing authority. That's why you must always implement a fast, reliable revocation mechanism. If that VIP wristband gets reported stolen, our bouncer needs a radio earpiece so they can be told instantly that wristband 42 is invalid, regardless of what the expiration date says.
So how do we build this kill switch? Well, there are a couple of revocation patterns we can use. You could add a small, specific on-chain revocation account that the owner can just flip. Or you can toggle a revocation bitmap to invalidate specific keys early. But the core mechanic is always the same. Once that flag is toggled, the relay checks it during validation and immediately rejects any further attempts from that session key with a hard delegation revoked error. It stops the attacker dead in their tracks, even if they show up with a perfect cryptographic signature. All right, getting near the end here with Section 5, your Security Lab Debug Report. Building these mitigations is great, but it's not enough. You actually have to prove they work. Think of this table as your blueprint for identifying abuse in a real production environment. For instance, if you're seeing repeated transaction logs, your root cause is likely missing non-state, pointing to a replay attack. For instruction forgery, the root cause is almost always a lack of whitelisting, and your warning signal will be a spike in rejected instruction mismatch events. And for expired delegations, that's an omitted time check, signaled by transactions somehow processing after their expiry timestamp. Monitoring these specific verification signals is exactly how you detect exploitation attempts early on.
Now, to successfully wrap up this guided lab, you need to compile a debug report that proves your shiny new mitigations are actually active. Here is the exact hard evidence you need to collect. First, save your relay's standard out and standard error logs, and make sure to include those timestamps and delegation nonces. Second, capture the transaction signatures to literally prove that, for example, a replay attempt failed to result in a second execution. And third, provide diff logs showing the before and after state of the affected accounts. This is how you prove to yourself and your team that these edge cases are securely patched for good.
All right, wrapping things up with Section 6, conclusion and next steps. We've taken our fragile session key flows, stepped into the shoes of the attacker, and successfully implemented some seriously robust defenses. So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. How are you going to combine session key delegation, strict revocation, and multi-operation batching in your upcoming capstone integration? Because in our very next lesson, we are taking all these hardened building blocks and assembling them into a massive, larger account abstraction integration. So consolidate that test suite, polish up your debug report, and get ready. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. I highly encourage you to head over to forge.college to dive deeper into the subject and check out a ton of other Web3 educational resources. Keep building securely, and I'll see you in the next one.